All right. So according to statistics from the Johns Hopkins University, there are now more than 5.6 million coronavirus cases worldwide. 2.3 million people have recovered from coronavirus. 1.69 million people in the United States diagnosed with corona, the most in the world. 99,700 recorded deaths. Now, if there's any good news for coronavirus, and I've not seen any good news, this is still not good news. Everything is relative these days. Everything is relative these days. But if there was any good news, on Monday, Governor Cuomo reported that the lowest daily death total in New York State since they started keeping records. Governor Cuomo said 73 residents died on Monday. And he says, quoting, in this absurd new reality, that's good news. Cuomo said, at any time and place when we lose 73 New Yorkers, it's tragic. It's tragic now, but relative to where we've been, we're definitely on the other side of the curve. Now, today, Cuomo reported there were 74 deaths on Tuesday. 48 of those were at a hospital. 26 were in a nursing home. Now, the death total in the state of New York is now 23,638 people. That is a lot of people who died just in the state of New York. And there have been over 363,000 cases of coronavirus in the state of New York. According to Cuomo, total hospitalizations, new hospitalizations, intubations, which is when you get the breathing apparatus, they continue to go down. New hospitalizations dropped to only 181. And that is from a peak of 3,000, not more than 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. So Cuomo says, in order to keep this up, we got to wear masks. We got to keep doing the same thing we're doing every day. He says, when you get up, when you walk out of the house, you got to put your mask on. That is a reality. Meanwhile, some other good news, if you happen to be living in New Zealand, they don't have coronavirus anymore. There is not a single person being treated in a hospital for coronavirus in all of New Zealand. The country is celebrating 5 consecutive days of not a human being being sick of coronavirus in a hospital. Ashley Bloomfield, the head of the country's health ministry, told reporters that the last patient with a confirmed case of corona had been discharged from Auckland's Middlemore Hospital. She says there are actually 21 still active cases in coronavirus that they're watching. Those people are obviously homebound, they're self-quarantining, but for the most part, New Zealand is corona-free. On the other side of the world, unfortunately, Latin America is now the epicenter of the outbreak. Yesterday, the director of the Pan American Health Organization said Latin America has surpassed Europe and the United States in the daily number of reported coronavirus infections, putting the region at the center of the global outbreak. There's now more than 2.4 million cases and more than 143,000 deaths in all of America. Now, Peru and Chile are reporting a high number of cases, and they're among the world's worst hit. They now hold the world's highest infection rates per capita over a 7-day rolling average. And on Tuesday, Chile had 77,961 infections and 806 deaths since the outbreak began. Brazil has overtaken Russia over the weekend to become the country with the most confirmed cases of coronavirus after the United States. A U.S. travel ban for Brazil went into effect, or is going into effect tomorrow night. It's going to limit the entry of any foreign nationals, including Brazilians, who are in the country within the last 14 days. I took an antibody test, and people are getting these antibody tests and trying to figure out if they had it. Do they have some sort of a level of immunity? Well, it turns out, at least according to the Centers for Disease Control, that these antibody tests are really not very effective in determining whether or not you had coronavirus. The antibody test used to determine if you were infected. So there's 2 tests that you're taking. There's a test that they stick the thing up your nose and they go, and you're like choking. And then they say, you have coronavirus, you don't have coronavirus. And then they have the antibody test, which is they take a blood test and they look to see if you have antibodies that are building up to prevent you from getting sick from coronavirus. Well, according to the CDC, these antibody tests that are giving in the United States have been wrong up to 50% of the time. Antibody tests, they're called serologic tests. They look for evidence in your immune response to the infection. Now, according to the CDC, the serologic test results should not be used to make decisions about grouping persons residing in or being admitted to congregate settings such as schools, dormitories, or correctional facilities, simply because those numbers are up to 50% wrong. Meanwhile, because of coronavirus, there's a lot of states that want to go to a mail-in ballot for November. That way you can, I don't know if everybody's ever been to a polling place in the United States, especially in a big city, but even in small towns as well. There's a huge line, and then you walk into like a little gymnasium, or you walk into like a little classroom somewhere by a school, or you walk into a little government office building, and there's lots of people crowding around, and you're in this snake of a line to go and vote. That is a recipe for getting sick with coronavirus. You shouldn't, in theory, have to decide on voting and doing your civic duty and dying. Or possibly dying. So a lot of states are going into these mail-in votes. Now, Trump, he's getting upset about the mail-in votes. Why is he getting upset about mail-in votes? Well, he claims the elections are going to be rigged with the mail-in votes. But the real reason is because Republicans win when the voter turnout is low. Republicans lose when voter turnout is high. Why is that? Because as a percentage of people in the United States of America, there is a greater percentage of people who lean liberal, who lean Democrat, than who lean Republican and conservative. So the Republican strategy has always been, for the last 50 years, to win elections, is to reduce low voter turnout, make it difficult for people to cast a vote, whether because, limit people, with all different types of laws and barriers. A lot of them were racially motivated. So they want to limit people to voting because they feel that their base will come out and vote no matter what. And they're going to limit the percentage of people, the Democrats and liberals, to come out and vote. That's why they don't like this mail-in vote, because the government's making it easier for people to vote. They could literally get a piece of mail in the mail, take out a pencil, fill it in, and mail it in. Well, Trump says this is going to be rigged. He made a big tweet on Twitter, and we'll talk about that tweet in a second. And to be honest with you, I have no idea, okay? I don't know how these mail-in ballots work. Every governor says it's perfectly fine. Multiple states, California, they've never had a problem with voting before. Nobody's ever questioned it. They've all been legitimate mail-in votes, including Donald Trump, who did a mail-in vote from the White House to Florida. But now he says because there are going to be so many, it's going to be rigged. And he put a response out on Twitter. He said, this whole thing is rigged. The election is rigged. And in response, Twitter added a misleading tweet prompting users to get the facts about the mail-in ballots. Now, clicking on the link takes the users to a Twitter Moments page, which includes a section titled, What You Need to Know. So basically, Twitter has called out Donald Trump. What he has said is that Twitter has said that you're lying. You're saying untruths. Now, this was the tweet that got Twitter to say that what Trump is saying was false and misleading. What Trump wrote was, there is no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed and fraudulently signed. Now, he's making all of these allegations as the president of the United States. Nobody has ever seen any evidence that any of this is true, yet he's saying this. So this is why Twitter has now said that what Trump, this is the first time ever on Twitter that they said for Donald Trump on all of his lies that he has said, because I think CNN at one point counted that he lies on average 14 times a day, most of the time on Twitter. But this is the first time on Twitter that Twitter said, you're lying. What you're saying is not true, okay? There will not be forged ballots, illegally printed ballots, fraudulently signed ballots. We don't have any evidence of that any time in the United States of America. So Trump is now all upset. He says Twitter should not get involved in the elections. Now, contrary to Trump's claims, voter fraud and especially fraudulent use of absentee ballots, as I said, it's exceedingly rare. But he keeps saying that. He keeps saying absentee ballot means there's going to be a false result. And he's doing it for two reasons. He doesn't want the absentee ballots to happen in the first place because he wants to keep voter participation in the election low. He wants people to be scared to go vote, that they're going to get coronavirus. But number two, if he loses the election, he can point to say, I got robbed. It was a fraud. I'm not leaving the White House. Now, he also claimed during the 2016 election, when he was still trailing Hillary Clinton by several points, that there was going to be also widespread fraud on election day. He was already priming everybody to say widespread voter fraud on election day. And then all of a sudden he won. Oh, there was no fraud. No fraud, no fraud, no fraud whatsoever. So in another tweet, he accused the Nevada Secretary of State, Barbara Kagaskvi, a Republican, of sending illegal vote by mail ballots and cheating by mailing every registered voter a ballot on the state on June 9th primary elections. So, we'll see what goes on with that. And by the way, if I was a governor or I was a Democrat, nobody on the Democratic side is coming out and saying, no, mail-in ballots are absolutely safe. There is no voter fraud. Let me explain to you why there is no voter fraud. Nobody's come out and said that. I'm waiting for the Democrats to come out and say what Donald Trump is saying is a lie. Twitter has come out and said what Donald Trump is saying is a lie. They are pushing people to articles that say there is no voter fraud. But I'm waiting for Biden. I'm waiting for the governor of California. I'm waiting for the governor of New York to come out and say, mail-in ballots, there's no fraud. Let me tell you why. Let me lay it out for you. What he's saying is a lie. Because if you don't go and you counter what Trump says, and Trump says it again and again and again and again, people start believing maybe there is voter fraud. So over the weekend, Donald Trump tweeted, there's a lot of interest in Joe Scarborough. He's now on Morning Joe on MSNBC. He said, so a young marathon runner, Lori Klasauskas, just happened to faint in his office, hit her head on his desk and die. And I would think there's a lot more to the story than that. An affair. What about this so-called investigator? Read the story. And Trump attached a story that has been made unproven, accusations about this woman's death. She died in Scarborough's office when he was a congressman back from Florida when she was 28 years old. Now, apparently what happened was that she had a bad heart. She passed out, hit her head, and died. But Trump is trying to say that Scarborough killed her somehow, although there was a full autopsy done. And even the woman's family says it was completely just an unfortunate event. Now, following Trump's tweets, Klauskas' husband, Timothy, wrote a letter to Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, hoping for removal of the tweets, falsely accusing Scarborough of murdering on May 21st. However, Twitter has declined his request. Now, as reported by the Washington Post, there was no foul play in this woman's death. A medical examiner ruled her death to be accidental. Timothy mentioned in his letter that his late wife had an undiagnosed heart condition and wrote that the president's tweets have taken my memory of Klauskas and perverted it for perceived political gain. Meanwhile, there were some ugly protests in Minneapolis. There was chaos and destruction in Minneapolis last night as police officers and protesters clashed over the death of George Floyd. The outrage began with a video showing police arresting the 46-year-old in South Minneapolis Monday. I can't breathe. Please, the knee on my neck, Floyd is heard saying in the video. The video shows an officer kneeling on Floyd's neck, pinning him to the ground outside. Thousands have flooded the streets on the same intersection Tuesday afternoon to protest Floyd's death. They packed the area, but were also spread out to be socially distant. People took turns sharing their frustrations and grief with the crowd. Chants of "I can't breathe," and "it could have been me," filled the air. We're here to let them know this can't be tolerated. There will be severe consequences if they continue to kill us. We'll not go on another day, a protester has said. The protesters eventually made it to the police station. Some were interviewed. They said they were happy that the police got fired, but certainly nobody is going to be happy until they are charged with crimes and brought to trial. Thanks for watching. For more Bradshaw Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.